Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to admit, when I first looked at the stack of documents for today, I genuinely thought there was a mistake.
You and me both. It is an intimidating pile of reading.
Right. I saw the title Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter of the Qur'an, and I honestly hesitated. I was like, okay, we are doing a theology deep dive today.
You were bracing yourself.
I really was. I was expecting to talk about rituals, maybe some chanting or some abstract mysticism, which, is fine. That stuff can be profound, but it can also be a little, detached from reality.
He could definitely feel abstract. You were basically expecting a traditional sermon.
Exactly, a sermon. But then I started actually reading the analysis he sent over, specifically these audio transcripts and the linguistic breakdowns,
Wow.
and my jaw actually hit the floor. Because the scholar we are looking at today argues that this isn't a religious text, or at least not in the way you and I have been trained to define the word religion.
No, it really isn't. And that is the hook for today's discussion. If you are joining us for this deep dive, you need to leave your preconceptions at the door. The source material we are covering, these highly intellectual lectures and etymological studies, they argue that humanity has essentially been reading this book completely wrong for centuries.
Yeah, it reads more like a legal document.
It reads exactly like a constitution.
Constitution. That is the perfect word for it. It's a manual for building a civilization. I mean, the author of these sources is taking words we hear every single day, words like prayer, faith, fasting, and he is completely stripping away the church vibes.
He is arguing that they are actually socio-political terms.
Yeah.
It is a total paradigm shift.
It really is.
Usually when we approach religious texts, we expect to talk about blind faith or personal salvation, but the source material we are unpacking today flips that entirely. It suggests that this text was designed to move humanity away from the era of blind faith and magic.
And moving it toward what?
Toward an era of reason, law, and functional social systems.
And that is exactly the mission of this deep dive. We are going to unpack how these sources redefine the most common religious terminology. We're going to take words you think you know inside and out, and we're going to see how this particular analysis uses deep Arabic etymology to give them a completely radical meaning.
Radical is the right word here. Because if this source is correct, then faith isn't about believing in the impossible.
Right.
It is about logical conviction. And prayer isn't about begging God for favors. It is about consulting a guidebook.
That one threw me for a massive loop. The idea that faith, the Arabic word iman, is actually the exact opposite of what we call blind faith in English.
It changes the entire paradigm. Instead of a relationship based on mystical, emotional devotion, the source frames it as a concrete system of life. Every term we're going to talk about today is essentially a cog in a machine designed to produce a specific result for society.
And that result, according to the text, is peace. But we aren't talking about inner peace, right? Like meditating on a mountain.
Not at all. We are talking about actual, tangible, societal security. We are talking about law and order,
Right.
a functioning economy, fair wealth distribution.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start where the source starts, which is the very beginning of the chapter.
Makes sense.
So if you open Surah Al-Baqarah, the very first verse consists of just 3 letters, Alif, Lam, Mim.
Just the letters.
Right. And I have read footnotes in standard translations that basically say these are divine mysteries and only God knows what they mean.
Which is a very convenient way to stop the conversation before it even starts.
It really is. It completely shuts down questions. But our source today isn't interested in shutting down questions. He offers a very different, very modern angle on this.
He says to look at how we use language right now, today.
Yeah, he brings up abbreviations.
Right. Think about it. If I send you a professional document and I sign it with MD or PhD, do you sit there staring at the letters P, H, and D, wondering if it's some sort of mystical code?
No, of course not.
Do you chant PhD hoping it cures your headache?
No. I know it stands for Doctor of Philosophy. It's a credential.
Exactly. It is a signature of authority. The source argues that Alif Lam Mim functions in the exact same way. It is the author's credentials placed right at the top of the document.
So what do they stand for?
He breaks it down linguistically. Alif stands for Allah, Lam stands for Alam, which means the all-knowing, and Mim stands for Hakim, which means the wise.
So it's basically an acronym.
Essentially, yes. The text is signing itself. It's saying, this document is drafted by Allah, the all-knowing, the wise.
That immediately makes it feel so much more like a formal decree, like a government white paper or a legal charter rather than a cryptic riddle. It's establishing its jurisdiction before it even gives a single command.
And that framing leads right into the very next phrase in the text, which is Zalik al-Kitab.
Which translates to, that is the book.
That is the book.
Now, on the surface, this seems incredibly simple. Okay, it's a book. But the source spends a surprising amount of time on this one word, kitab.
Because the linguistic nuance there is fascinating. And it's central to his whole argument. The Thors argues that the word kitab implies something very specific. In classical Arabic, kitab isn't just a book in the sense of a novel you buy at the airport.
Right, it's not a paperback thriller.
No, it comes from a root, meaning to write down or to compile. It implies a codified law, a constitution, something that is structured, bound together, and legally binding.
And the source actually pushes back against a major historical view here, doesn't he? The view that the Qur'an wasn't compiled into a book until much later.
Yes, he does. He argues that by calling itself Al-Kitab right at the start in the very second verse, the text provides internal evidence that it was a structured, compiled document from the very beginning.
It's claiming to be what he calls a surahs band document.
Exactly. A bound, organized constitution, not just scattered notes or disconnected verses. It is formally declaring itself a book of law.
And regarding this book of law, the text makes a really bold claim immediately after. It says, La rayba fi. There is no doubt in it.
No doubt.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate for a second here. Hearing there is no doubt in it, that sounds a lot like strict dogma. It sounds like a boss saying, don't you dare question my authority.
And honestly, that is how it is usually read by a lot of people. Don't think, just obey. But the source takes a psychological angle on this phrase that completely changes the tone of the whole chapter.
He differentiates between intellectual skepticism and psychological anxiety, right?
Yes. The Arabic word used there is raib. The force explains that raib isn't just having a question about something. You are allowed to have questions. You're allowed to investigate.
So what is rape then?
Raib implies a state of mental disturbance. It is an anxiety born of uncertainty, a deep, unsettling suspicion.
He used a really visceral analogy in the text for this, the rope in the dark.
It's a perfect illustration of human psychology. Imagine you walk into a dark room or a dimly lit barn, and you see a coiled shape on the floor.
Okay.
You don't know what it is. Is it just a piece of rope? Or is it a snake?
Your heart instantly starts racing. You freeze up.
Exactly. You are anxious. That feeling, that panic of is it or isn't it, that is Reb.
It creates mental disturbance.
It creates disturbance and it prevents you from moving forward. You can't take a step because you are paralyzed by the doubt.
Right.
But if you turn on the light and you see clearly that it is just a rope or, hey, even if it is a snake, but now you can see it clearly, the anxiety of the unknown vanishes.
So certainty converts that paralyzing suspicion into actionable knowledge.
Precisely. And the source argues that the entire purpose of this book of law is to provide that light.
Yeah.
It is meant to remove mental and emotional disturbance from society. It provides am.
Which means peace or security.
Right. If you follow the map provided in this constitution, you don't have to be anxious about where you are going. You might still face a snake on the path, but you see it clearly and you know exactly how to handle it.
I really love that distinction. It completely turns the book from a source of mystery into a tool for clarity. It isn't saying don't ask questions. It's actually saying here are the answers so you don't have to live in a state of panic.
It's a very empowering framing.
It is, but then the text specifies that this guidance, this map, is for a very specific group of people, the mutakin.
Ah, yes, the muting. This is segment 2 of our deep dive, redefining the user.
Now, I have always heard the word mutakin translated as the pious or the God-fearing. You know, people who pray constantly, who look very holy, maybe live in a monastery away from the world.
The standard religious archetype.
Exactly. But our source today really tears that standard translation apart.
He does. He considers words like pious or God-fearing to be very weak, almost negative translations, because they imply a withdrawal from life. Like you are hiding from the world in order to stay pure.
Right, like holiness requires isolation.
But the source goes back to the absolute root of the word taqwa. He defines the mutakin not as holy people, but as those who wish to navigate life safely and avoid destruction.
It is about preservation.
Self-preservation and societal preservation.
There was this great visual example in the text about a thorny path.
It is a classic Arab linguistic metaphor. Imagine a traveler walking through a narrow path that is just thick with thorny bushes. Acacias, brambles everywhere you look.
Okay, I am picturing it.
What does that traveler do? Does he just stroll through carelessly, swinging his arms?
No, he would get shredded. His clothes would be ruined.
Right. So he gathers his loose clothing, he wraps it tight around himself, and he steps incredibly carefully. He watches every single step so his clothes don't get caught and torn by the thorns. That deliberate act, that careful preservation of oneself is taqwa.
So Madikin is someone who is walking through the thorns of life. And those thorns could be moral corruption, bad economic decisions, societal decay, and they are actively being careful not to get torn by them.
Precisely. It is an active state of vigilance. It is
Yeah.
about preservation and safety. And the source makes a very dramatic point here using a suicide analogy.
Oh, right, the swimmer.
Yes. Imagine a man standing by a deep, fast-moving river. You can warn a swimmer. You can say, hey, the water is deep, the undercurrent is strong, there are crocodiles, please be careful.
And that advice is incredibly useful for someone who actually wants to swim across and survive.
But what if the guy's jumping in specifically to commit suicide?
And the warning is completely useless.
Exactly. You cannot guide someone who actively wants to be destroyed.
Wow.
So the source argues that the guidance in this constitution is only relevant for those who have the basic human desire to survive, to avoid life's dangerous ravines. If you genuinely don't care about the consequences of your actions, the map can't help you.
That really grounds the concept. It is not about being wholly in a vacuum. It is about wanting to survive and thrive in a complex world. And the source mentions that this person, this Mudakin, is definitely not a recluse hiding in a cave.
Absolutely not. The source emphasizes that the Mudakin must interact with the universe. They have to conquer the forces of nature, which implies engaging with science, technology, and intellect, while also keeping the laws of the Constitution in mind.
There was that scenario he painted about walking through the market.
Right. It's a very practical example. Even if a negative thought arises, maybe a temptation to cheat a customer or to take a bribe or just to be unjust while walking through the busy market, the Mudakin immediately wakes up.
They catch themselves.
They recall the law of the system, and they immediately correct their course. It is an active, dynamic state of mind. It is not passive holiness.
This brings us to what I think is one of the biggest sticking points in the source material. Segment 3, the definition of iman, or faith.
This is where things get really challenging for traditional interpretations.
Because the host in me, the part of me raised in Western culture, wants to say that faith literally means believing in something you cannot prove. That is the dictionary definition of the English word faith, believing without evidence.
And the source is practically shouting from the rooftops no.
He is very adamant about this.
He argues that the English word faith has been corrupted over time to mean blind belief, believing despite your reason. But the Arabic word iman comes from the root am, which, as we mentioned earlier with the rope and the snake, means peace or safety.
So how exactly does peace turn into the concept of belief?
The logic goes like this. Iman is a conviction that you reach after reasoning.
After reasoning, not before.
Exactly. It is the end result of intellectual satisfaction. You investigate the evidence. You use logic. You study the Constitution. And when your mind is fully satisfied that, yes, this system works, you reach a state of rock-solid conviction.
And that conviction gives you mental peace.
You've got it. That is Iman.
So it is the suspension of doubt, but it is not the suspension of intellect.
Perfectly put. It is the result of intellectual satisfaction, not the suspension of it. You aren't turning your brain off, you are using it to reach a conclusion.
But wait, I have to push back here. Just like a listener might, the text explicitly talks about Iman bil Ghaib, which translates to belief in the unseen.
Yes, it does.
If this is all about logic and evidence and proofs, how on earth do you rationally believe in the unseen? Doesn't that contradict the whole reason argument?
That is the million-dollar question. And it's one the source tackles head-on. He breaks down the concept of ghaib, the unseen, into 3 very distinct categories to solve this paradox.
Okay, lay them on me. What is the first type of unseen?
The first type is scientific potential.
Scientific potential, okay.
These are things that are currently unknown or unseen by humans, but are absolutely discoverable through science. For example, radio waves or ultraviolet light.
Right. To an ancient person living 2,000 years ago, radio waves were totally hyped. They were completely unseen.
But they existed.
They existed, but you couldn't see them.
Right.
But science eventually makes the unseen seen.
Exactly. We believe in potential discoveries. That's a rational belief in the unseen.
Okay, that makes total sense. What is the second type?
The second is meta-rational. These are things that are genuinely beyond the capacity of human senses, like the essence of a creator or the exact nature of an afterlife.
So how is believing in that rational?
The source argues we accept these meta-rational concepts because logic points to a creator. Even if we cannot put that creator under a microscope, the complexity and order of the universe rationally suggest a designer. You infer the unseen designer from the seen design.
I follow that. It's deductive reasoning, but what is the third type?
The third type is the one this course emphasizes most heavily for this entire socio-political discussion, and that is the future consequences of a system.
Future consequences.
Think about the farmer and the seed analogy provided in the text. This is absolutely key to understanding Iman bil Ghaib.
Talk me through it.
Okay, imagine a farmer. He accepts a brand new type of seed from an agricultural expert. The expert says, look, plant this seed, water it, and in 6 months you will have a massive harvest. 100 mons of wheat.
But the farmer can't see the harvest yet. The harvest doesn't exist. It is ghaib. It is in the future, so it is unseen.
Exactly. The harvest is currently unseen. But the farmer has Iman. He has conviction in the expertise of the agriculturalist. He has looked at the soil. He has understood the laws of nature.
So he follows the instructions. He tills the soil, he waters it, he weeds it.
And he does all of that hard work based on the reasoned expectation of that future result.
I see. So the source is saying that having belief in this text in the Quran is exactly like that farmer.
Yes. You are believing that if you establish this specific social system, a system of honesty, justice, fair wealth distribution, it will absolutely yield a good result in the future.
Even if the current society you live in is completely corrupt and a just society seems impossible to imagine.
Right. Believing that honesty is the best policy in a world full of liars requires Iman bil Ghaib. You are betting your life and your actions on a future result that you cannot yet see because you logically trust the system.
That is a wildly fascinating way to reframe religious belief. It is not magic. It is cause and effect. It's systemic trust. You trust the process to yield the result.
And that concept leads directly into segment 4. How the source completely redefines the word prayer, or salat. Because if Iman is trusting the system, salat is how you actually implement it.
Okay, we absolutely have to talk about the horse racing theory here. Because when I got to this section on salat, which pretty much everyone translates simply as prayer, I was expecting a tutorial on how to bow, how to prostrate, how to wash your hands.
Standard ritual instructions.
Exactly. Instead, I got an incredibly detailed lesson in ancient Arabian equestrian terminology, which was amazing, but totally unexpected.
It is wild, isn't it? But linguistically, it checks out perfectly. The source traces the root word for salat and connects it to the word musali.
Musali.
Now, in pre-Islamic Arabia, they absolutely loved horse racing. It was a huge part of their culture. And they had very specific technical names for every single horse in a race based on the exact position where it finished.
Okay, so the winner, the horse that comes in first.
The winner is called the sabiq, the leader.
But the horse that comes in second, the one that is right on the leader's heels.
That horse is the musali.
And the physical description in the text is so intensely specific. It says the musali is the horse whose ears are perfectly aligned with the flanks of the sabiq.
Visualize that image for a second. That is an incredibly dangerous and precise position to be in.
Right. You are running at a full, flat-out gallop, just inches behind the leader.
If you speed up even a fraction of a second too much.
Or you clip the leader's legs and you both crash.
And if you slow down even slightly.
You lose that alignment. You fall behind and you're out of the race.
Exactly. So taking that linguistic route, the source argues that being a musali, someone who performs salat, isn't just about standing quietly on a prayer rug in a dark room.
It is about being in perfect high-speed synchronization with the leader.
Yes. And in this context, the leader is the divine law, the Constitution.
That redefines the whole concept of what it means to be a religious person. It is not, I pray my 5 prayers and then I go out and do whatever I want in business.
No.
It is, I am following the trajectory of this law so closely, so intensely, that my ears are aligned with its flank in every single aspect of my life.
It implies constant motion. It implies intense discipline. And most importantly, it implies a collective movement toward a shared finish line. This is why the source argues so forcefully that salat was never meant to be a static individual ritual.
It was meant to be a system.
A system of following the rules while actively moving society forward.
And this really explains a phrase that comes up constantly in the text. Iqamat as-salat.
Yes.
We usually hear that translated simply as establish prayer, which most people think means, build more mosques or make sure everyone in your family prays 5 times a day.
But the source says it means establishing the system, establishing the social order based on the Constitution.
He uses the historical example of Moses, or Musa, to prove this.
It is a brilliant example. When Moses was sent to the Pharaoh in Egypt, the Qur'an states his mission was ikamat as-salat. Now ask yourself, did Moses go to the Pharaoh, the most powerful tyrant on earth, just to tell him to perform ritual prayers?
No. He didn't say, hey, Pharaoh, make sure you bow down at noon. He went to tell him to let the enslaved Israelites go and to stop being a brutal tyrant.
Exactly. He went to completely overturn a tyrannical, unjust economic and political system and replace it with a just one. That revolution was his salat. That was establishing the system of God.
There is also the story of the prophet Shuaib mentioned in the source material, and this one is almost funny in a dark way. The source mentions that Shuaib's people actually mocked his salat.
They did. They explicitly asked him, does your salat command us to not do what we want with our own money?
That is such a telling historical detail. If his salat were just a private ritual in a temple, why on earth would the wealthy business community care?
They wouldn't care at all. You can pray all day in your house, the corrupt elites don't mind. They objected because Shuaib's salat was an economic regulatory system.
It interfered with their corruption.
Yes, it interfered with their cheating and weights and measures in the market. It challenged their freedom to exploit the poor.
So prayer in this context is actually a socioeconomic reform movement. It's inherently disruptive to the status quo.
It is, and that completely redefines the role of the mosque itself. The source views the mosque not as a temple for worship. He actually critiques that idea heavily, saying Islam has no temples but as a community center, a secretariat,
A parliament.
a local parliament, a place where real, tangible matters are decided.
He calls it a training ground.
Right. The mosque should be the hub where the community solves its actual problems, where it trains its citizens, its soldiers for this system of justice, and decides on collective action. It is functional, not ceremonial.
But if you have a system and you have a parliament, you need training. You need to discipline the people who are going to actually run the system day to day. And that brings us seamlessly to segment 5, Ramadan.
Ramadan as a training camp.
I really like this framing. Instead of just referring to it as the holy month of fasting, which can sometimes sound like suffering just for the sake of suffering, the source calls it a refresher course.
A 30-day refresher course for the soldiers of this system. The ultimate goal isn't just to feel hunger. The goal is to develop taqwa. That self-discipline and self-preservation we talked about earlier.
The logic here is pretty bulletproof when you think about it.
How so?
Well, if you have the internal discipline to stop yourself from doing things that are normally completely lawful, like eating a piece of bread or drinking a glass of water for a specific period of time every day,
Right.
then you certainly have the psychological discipline to stop yourself from doing things that are always unlawful, like taking a bribe or committing an injustice or exploiting someone.
It is a literal boot camp for willpower.
Yeah.
If you can control your most basic, primal biological urges, you can absolutely control your social greed. That is the training.
But the source is also very careful to point out that this training isn't about asceticism. It is not about hating the physical world or punishing the body.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And he points to a very specific rule to prove that. The permission of sexual relations between spouses during the nights of Ramadan.
He uses that to show that the system opposes monasticism.
Exactly. Being a hermit or a monk is not the goal. The goal is to live fully in the world, to have a family, to participate in society, but to remain disciplined.
And the linguistic analogy used for husbands and wives in that specific verse is really beautiful. They are garments for you, and you are garments for them.
It implies incredible closeness, protection, and privacy. Think about what a garment does. It covers you, it protects you from the harsh elements, and it is the physical thing closest to your skin.
It suggests that in this system, family life and human connection are central. They aren't worldly distractions to be avoided.
Right. Now, within the context of Ramadan, there is this specific practice called itikaf.
Yeah, let's talk about itikaf. Because traditionally, as I understand it, this is when people go into the mosque for the last 10 days of the month. They sit in a corner, they isolate themselves, maybe they count prayer beads, and they don't talk to anyone.
That is the standard practice today, yes.
But our source, well, he has a very different take on the etymology of that word.
He goes back to the classical Arabic root word, akf.
And what does AKF mean?
The source points out that the root meaning relates to combing hair. specifically the act of aligning, smoothing, and untangling messy hair.
Untangling hair. Okay.
Yes. So he defines itikaf not as sitting silently in a dark corner, but as sitting together to untangle complex community problems.
Wow. That is a massive shift. So it's not isolation. It is a committee meeting.
An intensive, focused committee meeting. He calls it a high-level problem-solving session. The idea is that the leaders or the active community members gather in the secretary at the mosque to untangle the knotty, difficult issues facing their society.
And they stay there for days to focus entirely on solving these problems without the distractions of their daily jobs or routines.
Exactly. It turns a solitary, private religious act into a deeply social and political one.
It's almost corporate, like an executive strategy retreat.
And that ties back to the overarching theme of this entire deep dive. Everything in the source material is constantly pushing away from the individual and toward the collective, away from the private and toward the public.
Even down to the smallest rules, like the brief mention of the white thread and the black thread of dawn.
Right, the rule about eating during the night until the white thread of dawn becomes distinct from the black thread of night.
It emphasizes clarity. The laws of the system aren't vague or mystical. They're observable, clear, and based on natural phenomena.
Clarity is essential for a functioning system.
Speaking of shifting from the private to the public and seeking clarity, we have to move to segment 6. We have to talk about dua,
Oh.
the call. This next part, I'll be honest, this is going to upset some people listening. It challenges a very deeply held comfort.
We are talking about the prayer of asking.
Right. I mean, this is the core of religion for probably 90% of humanity. You're
Yeah.
in trouble, you're sick, you are broke, you are scared. So what do? You raise your hands, you look up, and you say, God, please fix this for me.
It's deeply intimate.
It is incredibly vulnerable. And our source comes in and effectively calls that practice useless.
He goes further than that. He doesn't just call it useless. He calls it an insult to the guide.
That is a harsh way to put it. Break that down for me. Why is asking God for help considered an insult in this framework?
Let's use the courtroom analogy the source provides.
Okay.
Imagine two people are in court, fighting over a piece of land. Both of them pray fervently to win. Does the judge decide the case based on who cries louder? Or who offers more bribes in the form of ritual sacrifices?
No, a just judge decides based on the law, on the evidence.
Exactly. God decides based on haq, truth and justice. The laws of the universe don't bend just because someone asks really nicely, but to really understand why it's an insult, we need to use the map analogy again.
Let's hear it.
You are lost in a strange, dangerous city. You are terrified. You yell out, "Guide, please show me the way."
Okay, that is the dua, the call for help.
Right. And the guide hears you. He walks over and he hands you a high-tech GPS device with the exact safe route already programmed into it.
Which represents the book, the Qur'an.
Exactly. Now, what should you do?
I should look at the screen and start walking.
Right. But instead of doing that, imagine you just stand there in the street. You are holding the GPS in your hand, but you keep your eyes squeezed shut, and you just keep yelling, "Guide, please show me the way. I am begging you."
No, I see what you mean. The guide has already answered.
By continuing to yell and beg, you are acting as if he hasn't answered you. You are actively ignoring the solution he literally placed in your hands just to keep asking for a solution.
The source argues that the book itself is the answer to the dua.
The text is the map. So the act of praying shouldn't be asking for a path to magically appear. It should be the act of walking the path you've been given.
So dua isn't me asking God to magically change my external situation. Dua is me changing my own internal psychology to execute the plan that is already laid out.
Precisely. And that brings in that incredibly strange, fascinating agricultural term the source analyzes.
Oh, the udder, al-daya.
Yes, al-daya.
Explain the biology behind this concept because it's so specific.
In traditional milking practices, a farmer doesn't completely drain the cow's udder. They leave a little bit of milk inside.
Why?
Because that leftover milk acts as a primer. It is a biological trigger that stimulates the cow to let down even more milk later. It encourages future production.
So how does a cow's udder apply to the concept of prayer and human psychology?
The source argues that dua is essentially about activating latent human potential. Just like that primer milk is hidden in the udder, immense potential is hidden within us. Humans have vast reserves of energy, intellect, and physical ability that we don't even know we possess until we are pushed.
Dua is the process of releasing that potential.
Yes.
But how do you actually release it? You don't just sit there and wish for it.
No, you release it through two things. Ish, which means intense, passionate desire, and nisbulinain, which is the correct fixed purpose.
So when you have a burning, intense desire to achieve a goal, and that goal perfectly aligns with the divine law, that intense psychological focus triggers something.
It releases your hidden milk.
Yeah.
It mobilizes your latent potential, giving you the energy and clarity to actually go out and achieve the goal yourself.
So dua is basically a psychological state of high motivation and alignment with natural laws. It is an internal mobilization of resources, not an external request for a miracle.
Yes, you become the miracle by following the system. And the source points out a key piece of linguistic evidence for this. In the Qur'an, the prayers, the du'as, are almost universally written in the plural form.
Right. It's always guide us, give us, forgive us.
It is almost never me. It is us.
Which means?
It means it is a collective effort. True du'a is the collective, unified effort of a society mobilizing to follow the divine law. It is not a private whisper in the dark for personal gain. It is a community crying out, let us establish this system, and then physically going out to do the work.
That is so powerful. It shifts the burden of action from God back onto humanity.
Which brings us to our final major segment. Segment 7. The complete rejection of fortune-telling, fatalism, and predestination.
Because if dua is about us taking action and us building the system, then the future cannot possibly be written in stone, can it?
No, it cannot. If the future is already written, then everything we've talked about today, the Constitution, the training, the system, is completely pointless.
Right. And the source takes a very, very strong stance against any form of fortune-telling. Palmistry, astrology, even cultural figures or saints who claim they can see the future.
He has no patience for it. He calls all those practices arrows shot in the dark.
And his logic is entirely based on the concept of free will.
Exactly. Humans possess choice. We have volition. Therefore, our future is not a pre-recorded movie. It is an open book that we write ourselves every single day.
But religious texts often say God knows the future. How does he reconcile that?
The source argues that God knows the future because God exists outside of the constraints of time. But for us, trapped inside time, the future does not exist until we create it.
There was a really brilliant comparison in the text between an eclipse and a fly.
Yes, that is one of my favorite analogies from the reading. The source says, look, human scientists can predict a solar eclipse 100 years from now down to the exact second.
Right. Astronomy is incredibly precise.
Why is it precise? Because planets and moons follow fixed, unbending physical laws. They have absolutely no choice in the matter. They are essentially massive, predictable machines.
But what about the fly?
But if there's a tiny housefly sitting on the table in front of that brilliant astronomer, no scientist in the world, with all the computers on Earth, can predict exactly where that fly is going to land next.
Because the fly has a tiny, microscopic bit of volition. It is a primitive form of choice.
Exactly. It isn't a purely mechanical object.
And humans are infinitely more complex than a housefly.
Infinitely. So the source argues if you cannot accurately predict the trajectory of a simple fly, you certainly cannot predict the complex future of a human being.
To claim you can read a human's future in their palm or in the stars is to fundamentally deny their free will.
It treats a human being like a rock or a planet. The source insists that the absolute dignity of humanity lies in our unique ability to choose, to act, and to create our own destiny within the framework of God's physical and moral laws.
Man, this really ties everything we've talked about together into a tight bow. It truly is a comprehensive system.
Let's review the stack of concepts we've redefined today.
Let's do it. First, the book. It is not a mystical text. It is the Constitution.
The Mudakin are not monks. They are the vigilant citizens navigating the system safely and avoiding destruction.
Prayer, or salat, isn't a ritual. It is the active implementation of the social order, running the race with your ears aligned to the leader.
Fasting in Ramadan is the military training camp to build the discipline needed to run that race.
Dua is not begging for miracles. It is the collective psychological mobilization of a community's hidden potential.
And finally, the future isn't pre-written. It is ours to build using this blueprint.
It is a complete, logically coherent sociopolitical system. The scholar here essentially removes all the magic and mysticism from religion and replaces it with mechanics. The tangible mechanics of building a just, peaceful society.
So, bringing this all home to the listener, what is the big takeaway? So what? Why does this linguistic deep dive matter to someone living today?
Well, the source argues that the reason the global community is currently failing, despite having millions of people praying, fasting, and reading the text every single day, is because they have abandoned the actual system for empty ritual.
They are expecting the harvest without ever sowing the seed.
Exactly. They're like that farmer we talked about, sitting on his front porch intensely praying for 100 mons of wheat, but he never actually went into the field to till the soil.
They have taken the command of ikamat as-salat, which means establish the socioeconomic system of justice, and reduced it to just reciting words in a room. The source argues that until the system of fair wealth distribution, human rights, and the rule of law is actually established, all the private rituals in the world will not save society from decline.
It is a massive call to action. It is saying that this text isn't a waiting room for the afterlife.
No.
It is a construction site for this life.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
It is about building a functional, just civilization on Earth entirely through law and reason.
Here is a final provocative thought to leave you with. Something that really struck me while I was trying to process all of this.
Go ahead.
If this scholar is right, and the map for a perfect society has already been given to us, then every single time you raise your hands to ask God to show you the way or to fix your society, are you actually praying? Or are you, in a very real way, insulting the guide who already handed you the instructions? Are you just ignoring the answer that is currently sitting right there on your bookshelf gathering dust?
That is a very heavy, uncomfortable question to sit with.
It demands that we stop speaking and start reading, start acting.
It truly does.
And on that note, we want to thank you for joining us on this intense linguistic and philosophical journey into Surah Al-Baqarah. It is a lot of complex material to chew on.
It absolutely challenges us to rethink the very definitions of the words we use every single day.
It certainly changed how I look at them. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We will catch you next time.